we are ready to rumble. Okay. This is Donita with prairiedishtrail.com, and I have a lovely group of people with me here today, and we are going to discuss the firmament while I eat my supper. So excuse me because I'm going to be eating while we do this, but I'm going to let each one of you introduce yourselves. So Shelly, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Shelly. I have a YouTube channel called There's No Place Like Home, and I am a homeschooling mom of 11.
That is awesome.
Yay!
My husband's in the background. He is running commentary.
Tell him thank you.
Debbie?
Well, you didn't warn me, so I guess I'll just wing it. I'm Debbie, and I'm known as Homeschooling Dietitian Mom to Minnie. And I have one son who is 17, almost 18, and I've been homeschooling him since he's 14. And I have a blog and a few other things that
We'll make sure everybody's links are in the comments. Yes, and you know I run by the seat of my skirt, so
no worries.
Work with me.
Yeah.
Kathryn, introduce yourself.
I am Kathryn White. I was formerly a Fogelman, so I am related to Donita. And I am a writing coach at KathrynJFogelman.com. And I have a almost 3-year-old on Saturday. Yep. So, and we'll be homeschooling her at some point.
And her husband is also giving commentary in the background.
Yes.
People in the background. Oh, more roses. Hey. Our oldest boy, he works at the grocery store. So I've been getting a nice running batch of roses. These are the ones they're stuck. These are the ones he brought the other day. Aren't those pretty? I just love it.
That was a good portion.
Okay. Well, to start off, I'm going to screen share. And hopefully this will work. So I started the screen share with this one. Let's see. I don't know if there is a way for me to show people in the side. Hopefully it will. I think it does. Yeah. I want to start it with the Egyptian. I do not believe that the Egyptians are the oldest civilization. I believe that the Bible is the oldest record of civilization, but I like some of the Egyptian graphics and stuff. So in this particular one, they've got, of course, everything in the Egyptian mythology is a goddess or a god. So the firmament for the Egyptians was a goddess. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Let's see if I can
I'd like to point out, not that I'm an expert or pretending to play one on TV, but I do love mythology and stuff, and studying ancient civilizations and tribes and stuff all around the world. Tribes, nations, civilizations, whatever, always treated the earth and the sky and kind of everything around them as its own being, as a living, breathing being. So, and then a lot of time, I think personally, a lot of that started out as just, that was, if you treat the planet like a living thing, if you treat our earth like a living thing, then you respect it a lot more. And then they would just depict it that way. And then I think later on in a lot of civilizations and stuff, whenever they were coming to the end of their climax, they would start turning it into gods and goddesses and giving it names and stuff like that. So you know, again, not an expert, but just kind of what I've observed is
Well, I
that.
think get further in the presentation, I think some of that's going to make a little bit more sense. Because our idea of life and God's idea of life is a little bit different. I went ahead and pulled this up. Shelly grabbed this. And of course, I like going back to the original languages. So we have the original word and it means form. And then I think that's rakia. Is it not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's rakia.
Rakia. Which that's funny. It has a woman on the Egyptian thing there, but the Hebrew word says that it's a masculine noun. So that's interesting. Extended surface, solid, expanse, firmament, flat as a base or support, a vault of heaven supporting the waters above, considered by Hebrews as solid and supporting the waters above. I think that's interesting. I did pull these verses. So, of course, the first time that we hear about the firmament is in Genesis 1. And the firmament was separated the waters from the water, divided the waters on the second day. And then he created the dry land, the seas, the grass, and the herbs, and the fruit trees and stuff on the third day. And then he went back to the firmament on the fourth day, and he put the lights, the sun, the moon, the stars in there. You guys jump in at any point in time here.
I was actually going to say, and I mentioned this to you the other day, Donita, is that I was always confused because it said, and the Bible is not what's confusing me. You actually explained this very well, but the firmament divides the waters above from the waters below. So I never understood when people are looking at stars through their telescopes, it looked as if there were waves of a liquid, as in water, passing over these stars, these lights in the sky. And I could never understand how, if they were within the firmament, why they would then be in the waters, which are supposed to be above the firmament. But you had a really good explanation of that. So I would love if you would explain that again, because that really made a lot of sense to me.
Well, what I kind of think, and of course, now we've got a mixture of beliefs, cosmology beliefs here.
Not cosmetologists, sir. We don't have cosmetologist beliefs here.
A lot or something. Yes. Great. We have some different beliefs here. We have 3 older homeschool moms who do believe in the flat earth. So, but we have a homeschooled daughter who is not there yet.
Not there yet. But
not
I mean, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say. And then I've kind of got my own theory about how it works too.
Well, my thought process is when we got the new windows in our 100-year farmhouse, they're double paned windows and they have an argon glass in between. And I got to thinking about it and thinking that the firmament, whenever he's saying that he set the lights, let's see, where is it? Let them be for lights in the firmament. And he made 2 great lights, and he made the stars also, and he set them in the firmament of the heaven. And it makes me think of that argon glass in between the panes of glass in our window. So I kind of think that the stars, since we're seeing the same stars basically all the time, that they are in between frames of the firmament, the solid firmament glass. It's just a theory. Don't know for sure, but that's what kind of makes sense to me. What do you think, Kathryn?
That could be similar. I've seen some like round earth models that could even work similarly, but I personally have always believed that space is not a vacuum necessarily, like we've been told. And again, I'm going back to a lot of the old myths and legends that I have read and researched and stuff like that, and how they will often talk about how it is water up there. And so I believe it's kind of more like, and we've supposedly disproved the ether theory that was forever ago, that we believed we were like a sphere in an ether. And but I basically believe that there is like an ocean up there above us, and maybe not like, I don't know, maybe not water like we're used to it, but something to that effect, liquid. And that would explain a lot of things to me, like why stars have, you know, those kind of wavy lines to them whenever you're looking at them and stuff like that, and just a bunch of other things too. So that's kind of my theory on it, is that it's not a vacuum, it is liquid up there. And
So I have a question.
Mhm.
When you say round, what do you mean by round? Because when people say flat, they don't really mean flat like what most people think. It's more like level. And I think there's still that, based on the Hebrew, right, and view of it, and a lot of other cultures, it was round. It is round. It's just not. It's like we've been told that it's like everything's on the outside, like all the countries and everything are like surround, like around this thing, whereas the view we have is that there's a flat surface, but then there's the firmament above and the underneath, which we don't really know exactly what's down there, but it's still a circle, like it you know what I mean?
yeah, I really don't know. I'm kind of at this point where I have seen enough round earth theories be proven and flat earth, but it basically all comes down to that one way or another we're round. And I mean, Native American tribes and cultures talked about that, and so many ancient cultures would talk about that they just accepted the earth as round in one form or another. And because there is so much surrounding us, trees are round, and you know, it just, the way bees do their stuff is round, wasp nests are round, bear caves are round, you know, it kind of just, it's all round. So I am not convinced it's necessarily a level flat thing. I'm not necessarily convinced that it's a sphere or a egg or whatever. You know, they're you know, NASA can't even make up their mind necessarily what shape it is.
Like
So
pear or something, or it's a banana, or it's a donut.
right. It's a banana.
Well,
So
I wrote down some notes that I was taking while you guys were talking. And when I started opening my eyes to the reality of what's going on, when I read, it's amazing. Someone said recently, I think it was David Carica, we read Bible verses sometimes and they're invisible to us because we don't have a frame of reference.
Well,
and so that's kind of what I'm seeing in my, you know, when I look at where it talks about the vault, let there be the vault, and then he made the vault, and then it says they called the vault sky, and then it says that the water under the sky, and I'm just going to kind of skip this way. I try to write notes. In verse 14, this is the the King James version, where it says, "Let there be lights in the vault of the sky." So and I've like reevaluated, like the rainbow makes perfect sense now. Like, why is the rainbow shaped the way it is?
right.
Because it stops, right? There's like a top where it roll. So those are the kinds of things that I realize now that I see it with a new light. And I do believe that it always amazes me how many times I can read Genesis and still go in and see something different that I never noticed before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing that I noticed too, during the summer, we have a lot of thunderstorms here, and I have heard it described as the thunder could actually be the sound is echoing off of the firmament. And to me, that really just brought a whole new view. And I'm in awe a lot of times thinking about this during these thunderstorms, if that could be a possibility, that this sound is actually reverberating off of the firmament. And just like you mentioned rainbows, same thing as sundogs. I will never look at sundogs the same way again. And I've actually seen that recreated. I wish that I had the link to the video. I'm just thinking of it right now, but it was recreated where somebody had a light and they placed a glass over top of the light, and it went completely around and looked exactly like a sundog inside the glass.
I'm not sure what that is, but we bring up an important point. The firmament is we think of it as I don't know how we pictured it, but because we were all born, okay, after NASA. So we were all raised with only one view of everything, right? But the firmament being a hard thing. And I don't know if you guys saw one of the can't say it's the latest Godzilla movie, but I think it's a Godzilla King Kong one. And not Godzilla, but King Kong takes this big giant tree, okay, and throws it at the sky, and it crashed and it breaks it. Have you heard about that? I saw a video where the person was making fun, they make fun of us, they know the truth. And I'm like, you're not going to break the firmament. I'm sorry.
The same thing happened in the Hunger Games. If you've seen the movie The Hunger Games,
I didn't notice that. Yeah,
she uses the bow and arrow and she shoots it up, and it hits like a dome over top of them. And they have it in The Simpsons. There's an episode where they're at a baseball game and they hit the glass ceiling and all this water comes through, and they throw this in our face over and over again.
And they're dreaming. They wish they could get through like that. They're wishing too. I think it's wishful thinking too. I honestly believe that Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley, that's what they were trying to do, was get through. I think break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. That's what they're using their magic and all that to try to get through something. They thought they could just build a rocket ship and go straight up and go through it. And then they, had a problem getting through the certain point.
And just, as in Operation Fishbowl down in Antarctica, when they were trying to basically nuke, now this is not what they tell us that they were doing, but I think that a lot of us believe that they were trying to break through the firmament down there in Antarctica. And I can't help but think to myself how completely reckless and arrogant that is. Trying to break through the firmament, can they not even imagine what sort of destruction that would bring? And yet they were down there just relentlessly doing it. And I don't believe that it was just our military doing it. I believe that there were militaries from other nations down there trying to do the same thing. So just to think that we as human beings are so prideful. It reminds me of the Tower of Babel, when they built the Tower of Babel and they tried to get up there to the sky because they wanted to make war with God. And that is what they were trying to do down when they were, it was Operation Dominic and then Operation Fishbowl. And Operation Dominic actually means Fishbowl of the Lord, but that's what they called it. So, and I just can't help but just allude that to Nimrod. And
we're right back to where we started.
That arrogance, right? The arrogance. Oh, I don't care what you say. We're gonna get you. You can tell us not to do, but we're gonna do it. The rebellion is the sin of witchcraft, right?
Happens, we're gonna break through. We're gonna show.
We're gonna do it. I don't care what you say.
No matter what the repercussions are.
It really brings a new meaning to the idea of rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that's what they're practicing to try to get through.
This is so funny, the stuff that you guys are talking about, because going through the slides, and I'll try to make sure that I stay on each slide for just a little bit so that people are watching can see the different things. But you talked about the rainbow.
Don't forget the Old and New Testament.
Yeah.
Old Testament, rainbow, New Testament.
Well, and you usually see a double rainbow, whether you realize it or not. And Dad used to call that the Old Testament, New Testament, because they were reflections of each other. And but yeah, whenever the flood happened, the great deep below and the window of heaven were opened up. And this is what kind of started our conversation earlier today, was Feed Your Mind channel had a really good video on Skystones. And I found where somebody's actually selling the Skystones. They've got collect and everything. These stones are supposedly about 77% oxygen. So it's like solid oxygen. And these are only found in this one area in Africa. Solid oxygen, which is just interesting to me. And it made me think of Dr. Karl Baugh. Now, not a flat, he doesn't believe that the earth is flat, but he has the most amazing model of the earth. And he has an interesting thought process on how things happen with the flood. And he believed that before the flood, the sky was pink, not blue.
I've heard that.
And yeah, and that broke whenever
there's lots and lots of ancient documents that are thought to be pre-flood that kind of back up his theory.
Yes,
that it was pink.
I've heard that. Yeah.
But there was no blue. So he believes that it's hydrogen, and hydrogen can come in pink whenever it's through an electrolysis process, which is interesting, because if we talked about the rainbow, like you guys were talking about, and you have all of these colors, and then you get to, and we're talking about the northern lights. We haven't talked about that, but Nebuchadnezzar actually had records of the northern lights, and the Chinese had reports of the northern lights. Galileo supposedly named them, of course, after a Greek goddess. So take that as you will. But it's frequency, right? So if God, and the idea was, and Kathryn, you might have to help me on this, Karl Baugh was saying whenever God created the firmament and he hovered over the water, he like electrified everything. He like started it up. You know, he breathed on it, he spoke it into existence, and he like started it up. And everything has a frequency. So the rainbow has a frequency. If we're talking about an electrolysis type thing that was holding the firmament the way it was at the time, we know things are different since the flood, then it's a very interesting concept. If there was no blue, you know, before, and then we've got these blue stones that we're finding that are supposedly sky stones.
Can you go back to that picture for a sec? I mean, I was just going to say something. So, what is the ideal range for us sound wise? The frequency.
20 to 20,000, 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz is our normal hearing range.
Well, it's just, what I meant is that people have talked about how the music has changed.
Yes. Yeah.
And like what, I don't know if this, because I'm certainly not a physics person, but how that applies to these colors, I wonder.
They set that on a 412. So that
have you heard that people sometimes that are deaf can see color? Or see the notes, or see the well, I guess see color doesn't make sense. Here, okay, you might have to help me with this. Here, see.
Hovind said he thinks whenever we get to heaven, we will be able to taste color and hear color, and we'll be able to see sounds and taste.
See sounds, I think is what it is.
And we'll be able to.
The rainbow is frequency. Seeing your different frequency spectrum on your rainbow.
Right.
Your Roy G. Biv is your different.
And that's what I've got up on the screen right now.
I don't know
It
about
is-
you girls, but I find it fascinating that oxygen, which is a gas, would make a solid object. It's just like with water. Just recently I started thinking about how odd that two gases make a, but the oxygen thing, especially since last night when I saw that video, thinking about the oxygen being 77% oxygen, but it's a solid thing. So mind-boggling.
Well, you got to check into I don't know how his name was pronounced, but the oxygen manufacturing facility that Lindy, I don't know how it's pronounced, but they do liquid oxygen.
Right.
That's why they like to get down to below absolute zero. And then they think they could, but they can't get to absolute zero.
Right.
Anyway,
Something else on these Skystones, they were found in 1990 and 1991, if I'm recalling correctly. And some recent testing, some of the last testing that was done on them was in 2019, before the pandemic and everything. So, but they found kind of inside that it also had a very high concentration of nitrogen. And every time they test these stones, the tests are coming back just wild on them. And they've been trying to prove that they're organic or that they're inorganic. And every time they come back, it's like, we don't know what this is. It's definitely not organic. It's not. So, but they're always finding something kind of new and odd with these. So they're very, very hard, but incredibly lightweight. Like a lava rock, the lava pumice is how people will describe it. So lightweight, but it's solid all the way through and it's smooth. And yeah, one of their more recent tests found that it had a high concentration of nitrogen as well. And I can't remember what oxygen and nitrogen do together.
Nitrous oxide or nitrogen's important, and the nitrogen makes up protein. I know that.
So, yeah. So I don't know what that, but either way, it's very lightweight. But then just this solid form of gas for some reason.
Well, and it kind of makes sense because the blue stones in Ezekiel, both in Ezekiel chapter 1, it talks about the firmament was upon the head of the living creatures, and he's talking about these strange creatures that are the throne of God. And I really like the way Dr. Michael Heiser explains the throne. But the color of a terrible crystal. And then he gives a couple of different colors here, but then whenever you go over here to Ezekiel 10, it said as it were sapphire stone. And I didn't get around to looking at like Revelation, but I think it said something about it being similar to sapphire stone, or the throne, the floor of the throne room being like sapphire stone or something like that. I can't remember.
It said a sea of glass, I think it said.
Something like that. Yeah. Something
Well,
like
it also in the book of Revelation, that's another thing I noticed recently, is that I don't know the exact chapter, but it talks about standing on is it a sea of glass? Is that what it says?
Yeah,
like they can
yes, but
see through. It's like they can see through. To me, glass is see-through. So that means they can see down below them. And of course, the ones that are there are the ones that have by the blood of the lamb have conquered, or how do you say that?
well, if these stones, fell during a catastrophe like the flood, then they may have gone through a process where we can't see through them now, but maybe it could have been seen through before the catastrophic process as well.
Some of the theories I've seen on how they were possibly formed, and especially since they have been found in Sierra Leone, which is where you find blood diamonds. which are formed only under intense pressure and heat. So, and they were found in the same exact area. So there's theories that they somehow came about from intense heat and pressure, something basically catastrophic. And I don't know that anybody's tested like what would happen if they heated it up or anything like that. I don't know if they've played with temperatures, extreme temperatures with these stones or anything. Probably not, because they probably don't want to damage them necessarily. So, but it would make sense if it were in an area where other valuable gems have been that come from intense heat and pressure. If that, if they were like in the flood, if the fountains of the great deep and everything are breaking up and whatnot, and you're having volcanic eruptions and whatnot, and you're just having this huge amount of catastrophe, there's a lot of pressure and heat going on all at the same time.
And you know, that really makes me think of, have you ever heard of sky ice?
Yes.
Okay. That is actually down in Antarctica, and they have been doing they have gotten tests where they've had this blue ice that does not melt in your hand as it warms. First of all, you can't handle it without wearing gloves because it's so cold. But when you hold it in your hand, or if you're in a warm place, it does not turn to water when it melts. It just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and disappears. And so there's a theory that they are drilling this directly, possibly, out of what we would call the firmament. And it is a beautiful blue color. And so I actually talked about this on one of my videos, and also the Skystones. And I had a lot of commenters who were asking, and this is a really good question, why is it that you couldn't handle the sky ice because it was so cold, but here you have this over in Sierra Leone, and where it's hot. So how can that be? How can they both be coming from the same place? But the process that you are describing, I think, really is a great explanation for that. And if they are actually pulling these samples, they would still be intact inside the firmament. If that were the case, it would still be intact at that point. And also, it's down in Antarctica where it is cold there. So to me, that really, the process that you just described, really, that makes sense for when people ask that question.
Right. And I've done a lot of thinking on that too whenever I was studying both of these. And of course, I believe God created the world much like he did humans and animals, and that we regenerate. We have new cells that replace old cells. And I think whenever it got damaged, it immediately started regenerating and started trying to heal and correct itself. And of course, just like if you scrape your knee, you still have that whenever it starts healing. There's kind of that very slight epidermis layer there, but it might be, depending on what infection's going on, might be kind of pussy, or it might be really hard. And depending on what your body is needing to protect itself on that scrape, it's going to create. And then definitely it could have been incredibly hard before the flood. And then after, it's having to flex, it's having to heal, or and like you said, just temperature wise, it's really cold down there, so it may need to take up a different composition to compensate down there.
Right.
I also have, and I have nothing really to bring to the table on this, no slides or anything, so it's probably another conversation for another time, but I'm a dragon nut. And in a lot of dragon stories, especially over in Asia, they talked about how the dragons, especially once they came to a certain age, would sometimes they'd become obsessed with the moon, and they would kind of go crazy and they would try to fly to the moon. It was believed most of them actually lived on the moon, and then that they could fly past the windows. Once they got to a certain age, they could either hear or see or something. They knew where the windows of the sky were at, and that they could go through those. And so I've always kind of wondered, based on that, if there weren't different parts of the firmament that weren't more like jello like or something, where it can keep the waters above out, but then let creatures pass back and forth between.
Well,
I
that
do
kind of
have to.
Oh, wow,
I do want
that's
to mention.
interesting.
Oh, sorry.
makes sense with the one guy that had the little submarine that went down and found the pool of water underneath the ocean that he
Yeah,
took through. It
Yeah,
kind
that's
of
what I'm like. Yeah.
all the water. And an eel, he actually in his video, I think, had an eel went through in between, but it died whenever it came back. So definitely there's something there, but that's definitely an interesting. Debbie found the two Bible verses.
And I also want to address something, because this reminds me of something that we talked about earlier. Is it's interesting that the cultures think of the earth, like what you just said, actually, Kathryn, about the earth regenerating itself. And of course, we know that even though these cultures have the truth, some of the truth, they tend to take it out in the wrong direction. And in the book of Enoch, it talks about the moon as if, the sun is referred to as a he, and the moon's referred to as a she, and the stars as if they're, it makes me think again that the living aspect in science nowadays just makes it seem like everything out there is just, it's not living, but there may be aliens living on in those places. But the
right,
idea of the
exactly.
living thing, that Earth is a living thing, but
Right,
she's not meant to be worshipped. Right.
Right. I love how they want to take out well, it's not Mother Earth, we're not pagans over here. We're scientists. We're so much better, but we're killing our Earth. And it's like, okay, if it's not a living thing, and, a lot of Native Americans would call it Mother Earth without worshiping it. A lot of the First Nations, they saw it as a, like, basically female being, and it is providing life for everything. So, and the Bible talks about it that way too. It's a woman travailing and in labor. So yeah, it kills me how scientists will try to take away the, like, I don't know what a proper word would be for it, the individuality, the livingness.
Yeah, the life aspect.
The life aspect. That's a pretty good way to phrase it. Yeah. Take away the life aspect of these things, but then try and turn around and tell us that we're killing it. And
well, it's just that they have arguments about stars evolving, right? And so the creationist astronomers are like, oh, we have proof that stars don't evolve. And I remember asking a professor one day, well, if they're not alive, then how could they evolve? And he kind of just looked, I don't know, his reaction. It was a long time ago. And now where I'm at today, I wonder, what did you know that you're not letting on, because you can't evolve? That shouldn't even be a discussion. Like, there should not even be a discussion there shouldn't even be an argument, like, about whether stars evolve or not if there's no living aspect of them. So you're like, they're contradicting themselves, which is nothing new. Right. It doesn't live, but it evolves. It's not living, but it's evolving.
Right. Exactly. And yeah, that could be a whole nother video too, about how we have yet to actually see a new star pop up in our sky, besides the one that, spoke of the newborn king that led the wise men to him. But we have documented history across the world in different cultures of stars dying in our sky, and where they can place the map and stuff. And anyway, that would be another fascinating topic for another time. So,
well, I did want to highlight that all of these different names around the world, I was able to find, of course, the Egyptian had some type of a firmament. Some people might say, oh, that's just the sky, but the Sumerian cosmology above The Babylonian firmament above everything. The Buddhist and the Hindu, theirs is odd, you know, me. And somebody who understands that better might be able to explain some of theirs. But I thought it was really interesting in this Buddhist one where they even show like a city up above, you know.
Yeah, the Buddhist, from what I remember, kind of studying it. Again, I'm not an expert, so I'm not trying to play one on TV either. But Buddhist pulled a lot from Hindu.
You know what
'cause
this makes me think of? This makes me think of eternity in their hearts. Indeed, God has set eternity in the hearts of men, and God uses that to bring people to him. And this is a commonality that we have with these people that we didn't have before, because we thought we were, you know, we were doing the NASA thing, and NASA has nothing in common, right, with this belief system, where the Bible does. Like, you can, there's it's very interesting to me to see that
Well,
aspect of it.
The Tower of Babel, we all spoke the same language.
Exactly.
Would have the same stories.
Yep.
So these are very, very similar. And then the Inca and the Aztec look very similar.
Yeah, I asked my friend, you know, recently, I said, how come, you know, we're all about the giants and all the cultures and the dragons and all the cultures, but when it comes to the earth, we just ignore that all that stuff's in the other cultures.
Right.
Right.
And I if you go back one slide, I'm trying to remember what that one, the Incan, the Aztec. Okay. Which the Incan kind of had it too, but the Hindus, the Nords, the Vikings, Incas, and Aztecs, the Hindus described it a lot better, but they all believed that there were worlds on top of worlds. And you can kind of see some of that there in the Aztec thing, where they have it laid out kind of around the pyramid sort of thing. And then the Hindu is definitely the worlds on top of worlds, and that's kind of how the Nords had it.
This particular one that I pulled up doesn't show that, but it showed in like different branches of tree. How do you say?
I think it's called Yggdrasil or something like that.
Yggdrasil.
Yeah.
Yggdrasil.
I thought the Russian interesting, Shelly, because you recently did a video on the sages.
Yeah.
And
the 7 sages.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is their 7. And this is their cosmology with it. Isn't that interesting?
Wow, and I didn't even catch that. That's Russian. I did not catch that when I did that video. And you know, they're just popping up in more and more places, and it just amazes me every time that I see it, because so many things are just tied together, and the average person will never realize it.
Right. And something about the Norse and the Hindu, kind of going back to that that worlds on worlds sort of thing, they always had a way to cross basically the firmament. They would talk about that. And in the Nords, they had the stories of the Bifrost, and basically how they would cross through on rainbows, basically, and the Rainbow Bridge sort of thing. The Hindus had kind of a similar, I'm trying to remember exactly, and what's the one guy in India? What's his channel now called? I cannot remember his name to save my life.
On.
I don't think you're saying it right.
Yeah.
Robbie.
Yeah, Robbie.
I'll try to make sure there's links below, because
he is so good, and he goes into a lot of and he grew up there around the temples and stuff, so he's definitely an expert on this. And he's got several videos where he talks about how they would kind of travel between worlds and stuff like that. So, and he believes that some of the old temples there could be mechanically activated, and he will walk you through the temple and show you all of that cool stuff. but he believes that they could be mechanically activated to basically help these beings or help humans cross back and forth, help point out and open these doorways.
That is
So
very.
You know,
There's-
when you were, Kathryn, when you were talking about how some parts of the firmament might be like a gel or like a plasma where these beings know how to get through, it made me think of the movie Space Camp. Did anybody ever see that movie?
Yes.
When I was a kid, the movie Space Camp, that was the first place that I ever heard that when NASA says that they're going into space, that they have a window to go through.
yeah,
And it never made sense to me. I thought, well, why can't they just go anywhere? Why do they have to have like a certain point? So
right,
to me,
exactly.
if they were going anywhere, it would be through a window, or what you were describing, you know, as like a place where it's different, where they
Mhm.
know that it's different. And that kind of makes me think of, I talked about in one of my videos how, you know, we know that there's waters outside of the firmament. And you also talked about that too, Kathryn, that you think that it's some form of water. And, you know, could that be why NASA, you know, even trains in water? You know?
Exactly.
And
I
why
think so very, very, very much. And I think that and you know, I have nothing. I'm just thinking and opinions here. But I think they knew that they could cross through at one time, and maybe they were able to at one time. Maybe they still are, and they just keep making things up about how we can't cross through anymore.
Right.
Or, you know, us poor peasants can't do it ourselves at all, possibly. I have begun to wonder, since they've been focusing less on flying up there. Elon Musk is now the guy that's shooting weird things into the sky and like leaving these bright trails in the sky and stuff like that. And I'm wondering if something hasn't changed to where they can't go through now. And I've got no basis. I've got nothing to back it up other than just their actions and how they have, you know, up until 2010, basically kind of about the time Trump came into office, I guess. How they quit doing anything space related, basically. And they were like, yeah, we've got some rovers up there and whatnot. And then got super focused on Antarctica. And I kind of wonder if maybe either windows changed or solidified, because as we see in like cells and stuff, you know, it like egg and sperm are a great example that nothing can get through the shell of the egg except unless it has the proper chemical and basically the proper spectrum code to get in. And then the egg will jellify for that one thing. And I've kind of wondered, it would make sense if it was very much like a cell membrane to me, where we can sometimes pass through.
I was going to say that would make you think of like when you die. Right. When we die, the Bible says that we must be born again to enter the kingdom of heaven. Spiritual rebirth is going to enable us to get through the way he meant for us to get through. And then these other people that want nothing to do with the truth and God are going to try to get through their own way. And
the back door.
Even if they do get through, they're going to be, you know, not probably going to be finding things that make them very happy or healthy. I put that verse in there just because sometimes it helps me to not try to talk. But earlier when we were talking about how hard it is for some people to just understand some of this stuff, it really does have to do with the Spirit. You know, the Holy Spirit makes things, it clicks for us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And other people that don't have the Holy Spirit don't necessarily, I mean, they can have the Holy Spirit and still not get it. I'm not saying they, but
the scales, like they have scales on their eyes. For
Yeah,
sure.
but
Yeah.
That's a really good point about the jelly thing, because I mean, it's true. There are definitely ways to get through, because the third heaven. You know, Chuck
And I think
Missler said there were
a lot of these cryptids or creatures and things like that might know of these, like Kathryn was talking about dragons. And so that's where a lot of them might be coming from, and they might not all be in the firmament. You know, we're talking today about the firmament, but those areas might not all be in the firmament, which I'm sure that would be for another video. But I do want to point out that when I say that maybe they're going out of the firmament, I don't think that space is anything at all like what they're telling us that it is.
Right.
But what I do believe, a lot of times the Bible refers to the outer darkness. And I know that a lot of times people think that that is referring to hell, and it very well could be. But I'm also thinking outer darkness could possibly be outside of the firmament.
Mm-hmm.
And when they are going through this area on the firmament, they would then be entering liquid. They would be in the great deep. Would that be an extension? What is who is it that calls it the Apkallu?
that does make me think of Ant-Man. Did you guys see Ant-Man?
Mm-hmm.
No.
When he got little teeny tiny, and then he like get lost in this. He could have been lost forever in this snowman thing, like being so small that makes me think of like being stuck in some dimension where there's nothing else. There's no
Right.
That makes me think of
Right.
what you just said.
And that could be, I mean, if you go by like some of the Hindu Norse stuff where there's, you know, spaces between the worlds, and you have to have a bridge to get from world to world. If you're not using that bridge properly, what are you doing? You know, it would be much like an egg. Again, I'm just, because that is such a great example. Like, we have instances in animals and people where the egg won't make it down the fallopian tube. Where does it go? It goes into outer darkness, and it isn't, you know, it isn't hell. It's just out there in an empty space. And so the fallopian tube is that bridge to get from where it was at to the next world.
Well, and if we go to the book of Enoch, which is mentioned and quoted so many times in the Bible, it's a legitimate.
Well, definitely is definitely just as legitimate as Ant-Man. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
It's funny how we get defensive over it, how people get defensive over that. How like I get defensive like, wait, but we read commentaries by the humans, and we read novels, and we read books, and we read history books, and it's true though. Yeah, I do the same thing. Just like, okay, wait, it's the movie Enoch. That's not the Bible. I'm like, well, neither is Ant-Man, and neither is, all these other things we're reading. But anyway, yeah,
Right.
I know we're
there, and it talks about the windows and how the moon and the sun goes through the windows and stuff, and it makes, on one hand, absolutely no sense because it's so out there to us and our thinking. But then whenever you're actually reading it and you compare it to what you're observing, it makes total and complete sense. It's like, oh, that's why it looks that way at certain times of, the month and things. It makes total
Well, it
sense.
also makes me think about what someone said today. Oh, you can't, when you try to tell someone, one of the ways that I know that the curvature isn't there like you say it is because I can see my town 70 miles away, and then they tell you it's a mirage. But they tell you can see the sun 93 billion miles away.
Really,
you can see the sun 93 billion years ago. Okay, but if you see a town 70 miles away, that must be a mirage.
Your face, Debbie.
I know.
Oh.
I don't know where I got that. My dad or something. My dad's got humor. Yeah.
You're right though.
The Big Dipper's tail,
it goes around.
It moves around.
Yeah, it goes around like a clock.
As
around
the
around the
horoscope.
Yeah.
The Sagittarius, Scorpion,
the constellations.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not a horoscope.
Well, I mean, they do the horse, they do the
Yeah,
witchcraft off of the.
we don't do that. Oh
Uh,
my goodness, are you going night night?
Is that a dot?
And we
She
start
doesn't-
thinking about where we come up with our names, right? Like shampoo. You know, my son's like poo. I'm all, wait, why did we call it shampoo? So now you're like horror. Horoscope. Is it horse or is it horror? I don't know. I start to evaluate words sometimes. Like, oh my gosh, that word. Oh my, it's duh. You know. Huh?
Yeah.
Like the word cursive, cursive.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Homework, guys. Write out how the moon works.
From the Book of Enoch and how the moon. Yeah.
Mhm.
I-
And,
I
how,
should-
and visually what
I
and
should have
see.
put your.
That reminds me,
I'll have
Shelly, you
to-
said something, a dog, something, sky dog, or what'd you call it?
Sundog.
I've never heard
Sun-
of that before. So I'm gonna write note here. Sun dog, sky ice. I'm taking notes. You guys taking notes? Taking notes. Steve. Good notes.
I should be.
Take notes. That helps me concentrate. And listen better too. Plus, this is too much to remember. Oh, plus it makes it so that I can have something intelligent to say when I talk. Or just impulsively, because I can be impulsive. Yeah.
The
Rainbow.
in the sky or
And
the shiny spot in the clouds, and it's almost like a mini rainbow sky.
the old wives' tale, Indian tales, if the sundog was on the south side of the sun, it was going to be warmer the next day. If the sundog was on the north side, it was going to be cooler the next day. And
Kind of like
nowadays, you'll have sundog
all over the
all
place.
over because of
Yeah.
their.
Thank you. The amazing trails that are over the top of us all the time because we know
Ice
there
crystal
is
formation.
yes, the ice crystal formation and the occasional cloud seeding over drought, extreme super drought, what is it called? Flash drought areas. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, we're definitely getting a different subject, but it's interesting to think about that. Like, if they can do that, then why aren't they going to these drought areas and just giving them rain, right?
Yeah, exactly. Why aren't they? I
And then-
kind of feel like they just want to kill all of us out here.
And don't
Not
forget,
just you. They just want to get they want everyone, not just you.
Yeah. Not just I get.
She means
Yeah.
us in Oklahoma, right? Yeah.
the Mason realm once, yeah.
Oh goodness. Well, let's see. Have we exhausted the whole firmament thing because we're starting to get sidetracked on other things? We're
Really?
getting
I don't
really
know, would we
sidetracked.
have time to talk about the northern lights because that is also connected to the firmament?
Well,
It
Or would
is.
you rather-
relations are too. The whole-
Yeah, it is. Like I said, Galileo named the Aurora Borealis in 1619, or I-16, whichever one it is, after a Roman goddess, and have been documented way back as far as 566 BC. So, I mean, people have been seeing these for a time. If we're swirling through space, then that kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But anyway, what were you thinking, Shelly, about the northern?
Well, in the book of Revelation, it tells us that the throne of God has something like a rainbow, but it's emerald around the throne. And then it also mentions I forget what stone it specifically said, but it was red. So red and green lights emanating around the throne of God. And what do we see in the Aurora Borealis? We see red and green lights.
It actually says there is a rainbow. It says Revelation 4:3, and he that sat, I'm assuming on the throne, was to look upon like a jasper and sardine stone, and there was a
Sardine was the red one.
around the throne in the sight like an emerald.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it tells us that the throne of God sits on a sea of glass. So I'm thinking of the sea of glass as being the firmament, because they are able to look down onto the earth. Remember, the earth is his footstool. So if we think of it that way, and also there are so many legends of the Garden of Eden, and it's not always called the Garden of Eden. A lot of times it's alluding to the Garden of Eden, but since it's in world mythologies, they're not specifically calling it that, but it is referenced very often as being at the North Pole. And, and even the Garden of Eden is said to have 4 rivers. It's said to be in the midst of 4 rivers. And if you look at old maps of the North Pole, there are 4 rivers that are going. I think it was their 16th century maps. I actually have one. I don't know if you can see it behind me right there.
Yep,
So
I was looking at it earlier.
Yeah. So there's 4 rivers going to the North Pole. And there's so many legends of the Garden of Eden actually being there. Or if not the Garden of Eden itself, there are times that they say there are portals to the Garden of Eden there, or some people say that it is in the interior of the earth, but that is the entrance there. But isn't that interesting that there are so many legends pointing to the North Pole as being where the Garden of Eden was? And wouldn't that really make sense for God's throne to be right there, and that to be the actual center?
Yeah, especially when you look at it
where
from a
Aurora
flat Earth
Borealis
perspective.
comes from.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting too that if that were the case, and God is sitting, his throne is there kind of around the North Pole area, Garden of Eden and stuff, that science puts all of their focus the opposite direction in Antarctica.
Well, sure. Distracting us from where we actually should be looking. Yes.
And it does say, until Chuck Missler came along and said that we have as many as 10 dimensions, and that he believed that the Adam and Eve had access to all of them before the flood. Before the fall. And then when you read, and it says the angels, or is it is it cherubim, seraphim that were guarding the Garden of Eden with swords?
Yeah, I think it was cherubim
that
were guarding.
And I see it as like a spiritual thing, right? It's a portal. Like you're not going to pass. We're not going to let you pass. And the sword is the word of God, right? The sword that's the sword symbolism.
Not just that, it's a frequency thing, because he said a flaming sword. So you're talking about a frequency that could also be reflecting, and that could be calling, showing the northern lights. Could it be the reflections from the sword that the angel is using to guard that area?
Yeah. And I forget which book that I read so many books at once, and I complain to you ladies about this all the time that I shouldn't do it. But so I don't remember which book it was from, but it was basically talking about how heaven and paradise, and some people even believe the Garden of Eden, are actually like the garden, not all of Eden, but the Garden of Eden. They're all supposedly the same place. So if you think of it that way, if the Garden of Eden, or the portal to it, is at the North Pole, and if the Garden of Eden and heaven are the same place, and the throne of God is in heaven, again, it would make sense that it would be right there above the North Pole. So
yeah.
Just lots of fun stuff to think about.
Definitely. Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up for this evening. Let's see. That
should give people lots of research to go do. Again, don't take our word for it. Go do your own research.
Yeah.
That picture behind you, Kathryn, that reminds me a little bit of one I have. I have a picture of a woman in a boat. She's looking really sad. Yeah, that one. Huh?
Is it the Lady of Shalott?
And possibly. I just really liked it.
Yeah.
When I was decorating my new apartment. And I just really liked it. I had no idea, but probably.
Sure.
In a boat and a blanket, and I think there's a blanket in it, and yeah, it's pretty.
And have links down below on some of the things that we talked about. Dr. Carl Baugh's website and several others, so that people can go and definitely do your own research. Here's where you can find the ladies, and I will have theirs. If you haven't subscribed to the magazine yet, and you are interested in learning how to be more prepared, become more prepared, and live more sustainably, Bible-based magazine that I would love for you guys to subscribe to. And people so far are really So I think we will let everybody go now. And thank you so much for being here, ladies.
Yeah,
And
this was fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yep.
we will try to do. See y'all later.